Hello and welcome back. Chapter 11, Urban Geography. And I'm thinking here, since there are 14 chapters, Chapter 11, if we were going to do a football analogy, probably into the fourth quarter now, which leads me to um, see out on the horizon that the final is now appearing. So at the end of this lecture today, I want to talk about that. Right, have something interesting that you're going to, something you're going to be interested in to help you get that A. But more on that in a few moments. I want you to make a prediction. We haven't made any predictions in a while. I want you to make a prediction about where people reside in cities, okay? And in the developed world, not the developing world, the developed world, United States, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, Japan, I want you to predict, where do people live? Do they live in the inner city, central business district, or are they out on the suburbs? Okay, and we'll see how that shakes out after the lecture. Let's take a look at the screen share, and we'll get rolling here. In this chapter, we want to evaluate the reasons behind the differences in the United States and cities in the developed world. We want to analyze urban land use and explain the multiplier effect. Some of your heads up terms, the multiplier effect. This is the added workers plus their dependents. Your basic sector, the producers, the people bringing money into the region. Your non-basic sector, these are folks that are servicing that basic sector. They're not really bringing folks in, but they're making sure, they're ensuring that the region is working, okay? The central place theory, this is where goods and services are produced. The concentric zone model, or three land use models we're going to take a look at. The concentric zone model, this is where the city emanates out from the central business district. The sector model, not too much different from that. The city emanates from the central business district, or the CBD, I'm going to call it, with the sector model, but they're via commuter rail lines, long rail lines. And then a multiple nuclei model, very different from the first two. The central business district isn't necessarily where the action is emanating from, the economic action or whatever. It's could be out on the periphery someplace, an airport, some kind of retail district, okay? Gentrification, this is the idea of refurbishing old homes, specifically here in the inner city area, that the homes that were left as people leave for the suburbs, try to raise the property value in the inner cities. And a primate city is where there's a city in a particular country, and the next biggest city isn't even twice as large as that. And in some cases, there are no other cities. So the primate city. Let's take a look at this. The economic base theory. The economic base theory. The multiplier effect is where the total population is the same as the added workers who add dependents to the population. Break that down. You have your basic sector, those producing goods or services that result in money coming back into the functional region. Your non-basic sector, they do not bring money in, but they make sure the urban center, the functional hub, functions. It could be government officials, schools, infrastructure / transportation, doctors, lawyers, right? Thus, the multiplier effect is, in essence, where a city's population and employment grow when there are more non-basic workers and dependents as a supplement to the new basic employment. Therefore, the size of the effect, the multiplier effect, hinges on the community's basic slash non-basic ratio. So the more basic workers, the more non-basic needed to support them, providing services, right? So job creation, job creation causes more folks needed from those quaternary sectors that we looked at last time. One basic worker, they're going to need one teacher. They're going to need a doctor, right? And so forth. Turn to page 309. Let's take a look at Walter Christaller and his central place theory. And central place theory posits and you can see your illustration area, a set of nodal points from which goods and services are dispensed uh, to a surrounding hexagonal market area or hinterland. So the size of the served area is determined by these threshold requirements of the proffered central place functions. When we talk about the threshold, what I mean there is just a little more explanation here is you need to have some kind of a minimum market, right? Some kind of minimum population income level to make this happen. Needed to bring about the setting um, of a particular good or services. And you can see your notes there, the central places of the region's economy. Central place theory, these are central places where goods and services are distributed to the region. And something to think about is, how would you use this theory to explain maybe the location of convenience stores like Sheetz? Turn to page 315, and I want to got some really interesting visuals there. As you turn there, I'll just briefly set this section up or take a look at the land use models. Land use characteristics within central cities reflect differential accessibility, market competition, individual locational preferences, and the modifying influence of government controls. In some urban areas, mass transit systems imparted to the settlement a repetitive functional area pattern of land use, summarized by classical land use and growth models. So the social geography of urban areas also displays regularities in the tendency of its residents to segregate themselves into population areas based on social status, stage in life cycles, and ethnicity. So on page 315, you see your first model there. These models were developed by and they're developed out of realities by Ernest Burgess, a sociologist in the 1920s. Or he observed this, not developed it. He observed this. And with the concentric zone model, you have your 5 zones emanating outward from the central business district or the CBD. The second ring is characterized by high population density and slums. The third ring comprises the labor force that are lower to middle class with smaller homes. The outer fourth and fifth rings are constituted by the upper classes and middle class. And there you have your nicer homes and apartments. The zone is dynamic in the use of land and the movement according to income level. Right? As your income level gets higher, you're more inclined to move away from the city. The city's pollution, its crime. Take a look at the sector model on the same page. As I said earlier, not a whole lot of difference, but there are some differences. Sector model, higher rate residential areas move outward from the center of the city, as did the concentric zone model. But here it's along transportation routes, commuter rail lines. So as the city expands, new housing for the city is needed. This sector is therefore dynamic as older areas are abandoned in place of outward movement. So the movement vacated areas are then inhabited by the lower income populations. And then thirdly, you have your multiple nuclei model. This model contradicts the first two. This model states that the urban centers are developed by the periphery, spreading from various nodes of growth, not just the central business district. So their activities are regulated to particular places in connection to their functions. Could be retail districts that need accessibility, ports near waterfronts. Let's take a look at the suburbs and the social status. Many suburbanites, kind of setting this up here, and have little contact with the central city that spawned the suburbs. Here in the United States, of course. Gentrification is responsible for a modest revitalization of some inner city neighborhoods, but urban sprawl continues unabated. There's no question about it. So, break it down. Even though, even though there are these revitalization projects of old homes and neighborhoods in the inner city, folks in the suburbs generally have little contact with the central city. So the older city and its growth was absorbed by the suburbs, and therefore the tax base and places of employment went out to the suburbs as well, and it afforded many the opportunity for an exodus to the suburbs, further segregating the ethnic groups and classes. Page 327, you have a visual there that you may find helpful. And here's a question, and I'm thinking ahead at the discussion questions at the end of the week. This might be a good fit for that. What do you account for the way ethnic groups tend to splinter off? Is this natural, or is this a sign of human weakness? You can look at page 406. Social status and in the city hierarchy. This here is determined by income, several things: income, education, employment, and the value of the home. Here in the United States, a good income, college education, professional level position, and type of home can frame one's status. A good housing indicator would be people per room. Good social status means, therefore, that one lives farther away from the inner city. So if you live farther away from the central business district, what does that say about your social standing? And going back to an earlier concept we talked about, is this a culture complex or a culture trait? And this is probably an expensive complex. Home, school districts, these are traits. Farther out, the logic goes, you will have a nicer home, nicer school district. These are culture traits. Urbanization is progressing at a rapid pace, especially in the third world. Most developing countries have a primate city where much of the country's commerce and industry takes place. And these cities contrast markedly with those in the developed world, especially with regard to the size and extent of their slums. Primate cities that are at least twice the size of the second ranked city. In fact, there may not be a second city. Thinking Bangkok in Thailand, Seoul in South Korea. The country may have several smaller immediate sized cities, but a city like Seoul or Bangkok will contain half of the country's population. And these capital cities are the result of once being colonies, where economic and political activity were concentrated at one central point. Therefore, the population growth has manifested itself disproportionately. The size of the capital city further encourages more growth. Lastly, an interesting concept. One of my favorites, maybe one of my top 10 in the whole course. And that is, and what I'm doing here is I'm comparing developed cities with the United States, really, is what I'm doing here. And I want to take a look at the Canadian city, but I want to just briefly set this up. Metropolitan areas of the world have distinct patterns of land use and can be differentiated on the basis of region, historical factors, transportation systems, age of the city, and ethnic and economic status of their residents. Take a look at the fills. We'll go north of the border here. The Canadian city, that doesn't take up much space. One will see more skyscrapers and people, but less suburbanization than in the United States. The norm for Canadians is multiple family housing units in the city. And this saves space, but less suburbanization. The norm for Canadians is multiple family housing units in the city. Right? Again, that also saves space where there's just as many people in the city area. Canadian cities are more dependent on mass transportation than its U.S. counterparts. Canadians also do not have as much expressway miles as we do here in the U.S. Canadian cities have a higher proportion of people who are foreign born. Toronto, melting pot if there ever was one. There's been less flight to the suburbs by Canadians, thus less distinction between the classes and the races. The income for residents in the cities is therefore higher than the United States because your educated classes and your producers are staying in a central business district instead of bolting for suburbs. You don't have the in defense of people who bolt for the suburbs. You don't have the crime in the Canadian inner cities that you do here in the United States. So job creating entities are still within the city confines. And page 328 has a picture of skyline of Toronto or Vancouver, one of those two. Let's move across the Atlantic here in Western European cities. Western European cities, and you can turn to page 327, figure 1130. I think there's some streets of Paris. Western European cities are structured thus as an irregular system of narrow streets. Most of those residing there live in apartments. Suburbia is generally absent there as well in Western Europe. The homes are more closely spaced since cars are not in as much need. Western European cities do not have the inner city deterioration that American cities do. The inner cities tend, therefore, to attract the wealthier, more educated classes. People want to be close to work, right? They don't want to be driving 20 miles to do it. That's what we do here. And then lastly, East European cities. East European cities depend on public transportation. Much like their Western counterparts, where it differs is in how they are controlled by the government. And just say this, the Eastern European cities were once under the communist bloc, right? Once part of the Soviet Union. And that type of world there, they were anti-capitalist, free market capitalists. So you didn't have the profit makers, with their big skyscrapers. You had in the cities, you had the government administration buildings because communist societies, right? Government control. And that hasn't changed a whole lot. I mean, the political situation has, but it just, capitalism has been slow to take root in the former Eastern Bloc countries, but that's for another subject. But you still have a lot of the government complexes around the inner cities of those former Eastern European cities of the former Soviet bloc. So in light of this, they were set up, for administrative and cultural purposes at one time. So there you have it, the lecture for this week. And you have your graphic organizer there, your visual for urban geography. We looked at the multiplier effect today, the central place theory, land use patterns. You have a visual for that. We looked at suburbs and social status, primate cities, and urbanization, right? You have your American cities, Canadian cities, West European cities, and Eastern European cities. Okay, let's look at what is up ahead. And I have couple interesting things or two for you. Got a reading for you, small readings, page 317, 318 in your textbook, Birds of a Feather, and this talks about why people segregate with people they're familiar with, and the gated community. Again, I'm looking for some citations of that because it dovetails into the discussion question. For those of you who are not reading or not listening to me, and you're therefore not tapping into these readings and including them in your discussion questions, and you're losing points. Wednesday, have some sum it up sheets, right? So get some sum it up sheets. You're going to take the major themes and sum it up in your own words, not mine or the textbooks, okay? You'll lose points for that. Thursday, you have a lab, and it's a two-part lab. I'm going to give you guys a shot of Johnstown city streets and landmarks, and I want you to compare that with one of the land use models. Is it a multiple nuclei model? Is it concentric zone? Okay. And then also on that, I have an article on St. Cloud, Minnesota Community College / Technical School, and the basic sector. What the basic sector that has emanated from that school's existence. And I'm going to have you infer probably what non-basic sector was needed to do that. So practice a little deeper with some of the concepts. Friday, Sunday, right, the basic drill. And then Monday we quiz and begin chapter 12, the geography of natural resources. Now, because the final is on the horizon, see it up on top of, you can see it in my mind's eye. I'm going to give you guys an item sheet for the final. I'm going to tell you what short answers to study for, and the essays. There's going to be 5 essays. I'm going to give you guys an option to cover 3 of them. All right. So bone up on those things about 3 weeks out, and then your quizzes. You'll have your quizzes. You can go back over at the first half of that final. I'm just kind of culling things from the quizzes back onto the final. Okay. So, and there you have it for week 11. Any questions on any of that? Contact me. Don't hesitate. If you ever need to talk to me, I am certainly not opposed to that either. I invite you to do it. I would say see my formal office hours for you guys. They're my Mount Aloysius hours. Other times I might be with one of my other institution doing things for them. So if there's what did you guys write down? What did you write down? What was your prediction? Are there more people in the developing world living in the inner city or out in the suburbs? If you said in the inner city, you would be right. If you did not, I would think that's probably normal, right? Conventional wisdom, because that's not what we do here. And but there are reasons for that. So until next time, you guys have a fantastic week. And again, you need to get a hold of me, do so. And so you guys have a great week, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.